All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. Let's sort out a little bit of business with Jim Woods. On the video Ideas, Philosophy, and Murder, which is less than 2 minutes, very short video addressed to Jim, he makes a comment, and he's going to reference here in this first sentence, he's going to reference this video, which I made a video about, or maybe he's going to reference this video, which is a video about this video, Making Sense number 169. Destroy the alt-right racist Nazis. Okay, that's what he's referring to. He says, from the prior video, you said the differences in outcomes between the races are either caused by genetics or caused by racism. That's not me talking, Jim. I didn't mean to imply that that was my view. I was going over Sam Harris's guest's view, and she is saying that the fact that there's any difference at all between how black people experience society and how white people experience society can not be caused by genetics, because we're genetically equivalent. It must be caused by racism, and those are the only two possible causes, right? So you're saying ideas are more important, but I agree with that. Ideas are more important than genes. Look at North and South Korea. Same genes. Now, Zeben64's upset about this because how do I know the IQ of North Koreans? But I don't need to. The IQ of North Koreans probably is lower than South Koreans because they're not as well educated. But they've got the same genes. They started with the same genes back in the 1950s when it was split, when the country was split. So if genetics are important, then North and South Korea would have, they would have something in common. The fact that they are bordered by two fairly advanced societies at this point in history allows them to have certain technologies and stuff they don't have in South Africa or in sub-Saharan Africa maybe. But the point is, they wouldn't have those if they weren't next to civilized societies where they could, for example, kidnap and steal technology, kidnap people and steal technology. So they're not able to produce things in North Korea. They're not able to advance their economy, but they've got the same genes as the people in South Korea. So genetics doesn't really matter that much. Okay? Now, if you say, well, genetics doesn't matter at all, then I say, well, then why are 97% of people in jail for murder men? If genetics has nothing to do with that. So, of course, genetics comes into the picture. Ideas are far, far more important than genetics. It is not the genetics that I'm born with that determines whether or not I'm a murderer. Right? If it were, then I'd be a murderer because I'm a man. But it's not true that all men are murderers. So ideas are more important than genetics. That's true. Does genetics play any role at all? I mean, come on. I'm pushing at an open door here. Of course genetics plays a role. Of course it does. You then, quoting Jim now, you then retrenched, saying essentially, okay, but give me some percentage that can be attributed to genetics. Related to cause at those macro levels, the percentage is 0. How can you say that? You have no evidence for that. I have evidence that men murder more because they're men. Not because society is sexist against them. Now, Sam Harris's guest would have to say that. She's backed into a corner where she would have to say 97% of people in jail for murder are men because society is sexist against men. She's in a stupid position, though. All right, the percentage is 0. Wrong. That's wrong, Jim. There's a higher percentage of, if I do become a murderer, there's a higher percentage of my genes involved in that than you're giving credit. You're saying it's 0%. I think that male testosterone, which you mentioned yourself, right there is a cause, can be a cause So he continues, genetics are relevant to an individual, but not to arbitrary groups like race as you're attempting to apply them. Now, they're only relevant to individuals because only individuals exist. Now, I'm not trying to apply genetics to arbitrary groups like races. I'm not trying to apply genetics to arbitrary groups like races. But people have tested these groups and noticed differences in them. So, it doesn't matter what I apply, it doesn't matter how arbitrary the groups are. People who are from the East have a higher IQ and better abilities in math. Jim, with what you say there, this arbitrary groups is a non sequitur. Applying genetics to arbitrary groups is a non sequitur. What are you going to say about Ashkenazi Jews? What are you going to say about that? Look, it's better to admit reality and face reality and deal with reality. Okay? If you deal with reality, at least you can point out the fact that although genetics seems to be present as a cause, it is unbelievably minor. And look at North and South Korea. Same gene pool, very, very different outcomes because of ideas, because of philosophy. You don't ever get to the point where you can prove this point, that ideas are more important than genes. You never get there because you're stuck saying genes aren't important at all. You're not on solid ground. Now, he says down here at the end, if you want to talk race and IQ, Stuart is your guy. He means Legendre 007, Stuart Hayashi, who stopped talking to me back when I said Trump was awesome. Or when I think it was when I did a video called Dear Never Trumpers. What the hell? All right. He continues, you further suggest that it would be hard for me to convince you that the cause is not genetic, because as you said in the prior video, you believe it. No, you can't convince me the cause is not genetic because I can see with my own eyes that males murder more than females. That's genetic. If you call it testosterone, I'll say that testosterone's genetic. Males murder more than females. Okay? So you can't convince me that that's not genes doing that. You can't convince me that that's not our genetic makeup. That that's not the nature of me as a man that causes me to be more violent and maybe even more effective in the use of violence. Okay? No, you're not going to convince me off of that. And then he says, however, you cite no evidence of genetic markers specific to race that would cause differences in outcomes caused by race per se. I don't need to. My point is, can genetics affect our behavior? If you say yes, I win. I don't want genetics. I don't want determinism. I can't find determinism. I look at North and South Korea, and I do not see that genetics is the determining factor there. I think ideas is the determining factor in the North versus South Korea. So I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for genetic determinism. My point is that you can't prove your point. You can't prove your case that ideas are more important than genetics if you can't at least admit that genetics are present. It's kind of an insane position you're trying to hold. He says, at most you posit some anecdotal, environmentally driven, natural selection influences that might be coincidentally present with race because white people never had to run in the prehistoric past. And marathon was a myth. I said that white people have been using machines for hundreds of years. Okay, I didn't say thousands. Now, it occurs to me that people probably had an easier life in Rome, and there were probably more people who were fat and unhealthy who were able to survive and reproduce in Rome than in other societies because they were wealthier and had more productivity. But maybe not. I don't really know. I didn't try to make that case. I try to make the case for the last several hundred years. The Europeans of 500 years ago were probably less healthy than Africans who live in the jungle today. Probably. But I don't know if you go back 2,000 years if that were true. Maybe, yeah. In fact, that thought has occurred to me that we might have genes that have been selected for ever since the age of farming and agriculture started, way back in Mesopotamia. Definitely, we did have a sorting through of the population. Those who could survive on mostly grain in their diet survived and have children. Those who could not eat grain died because that's all there was, grain. Everybody lived on bread. That was the only food. I mean, they had other types of food, but it was a staple of the diet, 30, 40, 50, 70% of their calories came from bread. That was a bottleneck for the population in that area, and anybody who's alive or descended from that area is descended from people who were able to eat bread to survive on. Now, what other things has that done? I don't know, maybe a lot. So he brings up marathon. Okay, maybe I can push it back that far and say that what if I said that the running feat done at marathon by that Greek wasn't really that impressive compared to the running done by sub-Saharan Africans? So yeah, you're on weak ground there, Jim. Hate to say it. Continuing, in the original video, you referenced IQ as being caused by race. Now, okay, is it related to race? Is there any relation at all? That's not for me to say. That's for the people who have gathered this information. And just go read the bell curve. Just go read the bell curve by Mr. Murray. IQ is being caused by race. Not caused by, but has a relation to, okay? He says no. But consider some information reported by Thomas Sowell about how black performance on IQ tests in America have improved drastically over time, and the same is true for white performance. Comparing IQ test performance of current blacks to past white shows that blacks had closed the IQ gap, but for the subsequent performance improvement by whites. All right, Jim, you're the one who said it, not me. You said with all the progress over the past decades, blacks today are where whites were 40 years ago. So you're saying that we can improve blacks to where we are, to the situation they are in today, by all of the progress we've had over the last 40 years, in which time they've caught up with where whites were 40 years ago. But whites have moved on. You said it, not me. Now, I don't put much stock in this because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you can take a group of 1,000 people and test them and say something about their average IQ. You still don't know about Jim or Joe or Mike or John. You still don't know about the individual. Variance inside of groups is huge, and variance between groups is tiny. You get a group of people with lots of melanin in their skin, and a group of people with medium melanin in their skin, and a group of people with very, very little melanin in their skin, and test them, and there will be some differences. 5 points or 10 points in IQ difference over the groups, okay? But you take any given individual out of these groups, and there will be 60-point IQ spread, okay? So inside the black group, you'll have people from 60 to 140 IQ. Same in the white group, same in the Chinese group, 60 to 140. Interestingly, do the white people have less melanin or do the Asians? And I've seen pictures of Asians having less melanin than white people. So who's really low on melanin? All right, let's stop there.